Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the QIMERA 1.7 release webinar. I'm Samantha Bruce, QPS Technical Sales Engineer, and I'll be acting in a support role today. If you have tuned into one of our previous QIMERA release webinars, you'll be familiar with today's format. We plan to use some slides, but we'll largely focus on demoing the software as well as answering any questions that you may have. So if you'd like to ask a question, please just type it into the GoToWebinar chat box. We will be monitoring the chat box, and the plan is to pause frequently to answer questions verbally. You may also see us provide some answers directly in that chat box as well. Some other things to note: there are handouts that you can access while in the GoToWebinar session. You'll find detailed release notes regarding the functionality that will be covered today, in addition to a copy of the slides that will be shown. We are actually recording this webinar today too, so we'll do an email follow-up with each of you, and we'll provide a link to where you can access that webinar on YouTube after the fact. Let's see, I'd also like to mention that QPS does offer free software evaluations. So if you don't have a QIMERA license, but you are interested in trying it out, you can visit our website, www.qps.nl, and click on QIMERA in the Evaluate section, where you'll be prompted to fill out the form with your contact information. Or today, actually, to streamline this process a bit, if you type Evaluate in the comment box at any time during the webinar, we'll follow up with you directly via email to get you an evaluation as well through that channel. All right, one last thing I want to do before we get started is to introduce you to the webinar team. Jonathan Bodwin and Matt Wilson will share the presenting role today. Jonathan is the QIMERA product manager and Matt is the QIMERA sales manager. And additionally, Mo Doucette, the lead QIMERA developer, and myself will be in the background to help answer questions. So without further ado, I'll pass this off to Jonathan and we'll get started.
Thanks, Sam. Just do an audio check. Can you hear me all right?
Sounds good.
All right, great, thanks. All right, let's get this started. There we go. So topics today, we're going to cover a small range of topics. We hope to pack this in about 30 minutes, but it might stretch longer if our question breaks take a couple more minutes, and that's fine by us. So we're going to cover a couple of things that we did in the 1.6.3 and the 1.7.0 releases. The big theme of that is the slice editor improvements. In 1.7.1, we helped a client out who was deciding to use QIMERA on a NOAA job, and they had requested a few emergency turnarounds on a few features. So we did that for them in QIMERA 1.7.1, and Matt's going to touch on that. After that, we'll hand it back to me. I'll give a quick sneak peek talking about what's coming in QIMERA 2.0. And then lastly, as part of 2.0, we'll be delivering on our feedback project. I just wanted to spend a few minutes reminding folks about the feedback project and telling the story of how we're trying to get better and better and better at handling customer suggestions about our software. So let's dive right into the first chunk, the slice editor improvements. I've broken it down. If you scan through the release notes for those two releases, you'll see those items are highlighted on the left. I'm not going to read all of that for you because we're going to go through that shortly. The items in green are covered in a small series of demo movies we're going to see. The ones in black really are incredibly important. So if you have questions about that, ask in the chat box or just have a look in the release notes and we can provide some more detail on that. So let's quickly scan through the interface changes because there's a lot that's changed, a lot of little things, but overall it's created a big change in the user experience. So I'll walk around the application clockwise from the top left. We've redesigned the instant surface filtering experience. We'll see a movie about that. What that's meant to really do is give you one-click access to the most common functions on grids, such as removing bad areas, reclaiming some data, or applying a particular filter like a spline. We've decluttered the slice editor toolbar by moving the controls for the points that are in the scene. That's the middle area there that's in 3D. Those are now up in a new scene editor toolbar that lets you control how they're shown, and it's completely decoupled from the slice editor itself. One thing that came out that was actually the top voted feedback item, I think, prior to the 1.7.0 release, was having better control over the vertical exaggeration. That's in there. We'll cover that in a movie. We've redesigned the slice editor toolbar, as you've probably noticed if you've downloaded the latest releases. We've improved the default coloring for color by line to maximize the contrast from one line to the next. And then lastly, rounding up the clock back to where we started. When you're coloring by line, you'll notice that the raw sonar files have a color indicator beside them to help you better figure out which lines are which. All right, so here are the movies we're going to cover, and this is just an intro slide for each one. First one we'll cover, and each one's about a minute or so long, the redesign of the instant surface filtering experience. And what we'll do is I'll just narrate here. So we're going to zoom into a particular area. This is the Bedford Basin in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. And if I click on that red polygon, I can just click right in the map and get rid of some wayward soundings that have, just bad bottom detections that are off the edge of the grid. And you'll see that the reject all soundings filter is run. And I can do that, walk around the edge of the grid and clean that up. Before that took a couple of clicks for that to happen. Now it's just very obvious. It's a red polygon. It's immediately obvious what it does. Let's show an example of what it's like when you make a mistake. Here I'm taking away some good data. If you go up to the button and you long press, you can get instant surface accept. And again, you draw polygons, and anywhere you draw a polygon, it'll reclaim the data in there. And this came right from the cloud user experience that we had before we had Qimera. So you can see the data came back. So let's look at what happens. We'll tip into 3D and see how you can use this type of one-click solution for cleaning bad data in the grid itself. So if you long press, you get the instant surface filter icon, which then allows you to choose a filter to apply. In this case, we'll pick a very strong spline. And again, we'll just draw polygons around the spikes in the scene. And when you close the polygon with the right click, it filters those right out. And that's pretty much it for that little demo. So was available in Qimera 1.6. The buttons we've learned through some user feedback weren't quite as intuitive as we thought they were. So we're quite happy to have that out. So moving on to the second movie, another little 1 to 2 minute thing. We'll look at the new scene editor toolbar. So here, this will just autoplay. So I've got the same area loaded up. I've colored the surface by standard deviation, or uncertainty rather. And if I launch the slice editor, you'll see that the scene editor toolbar is now active on the top of the screen. And I have control over the visibility of the points in the scene itself. So I can toggle that on and off. If I want to see the grid underneath clearly, or if I want to see the points, I can. I control the point size. You were able to do this before with the slice editor, but it was all smushed up together in the slice editor toolbar. You still have the control over the point size in the slice editor itself, in the slice editor toolbar. And then lastly, you can control the coloration of the points. In this case, in the scene, we're coloring by ping, and now by depth. And that's operating independently of the slice editor. I come down to the slice editor, I can color by line. And you'll see that the survey lines, this is the new coloring, I believe it's called Kelly colors. And then you'll see that the coloration is marked up for the lines that are loaded in the slice editor also. So you have a better context of which lines you're working on. All right, for the third little movie, redesign of the slice editor toolbar. The aim is to make it more intuitive, easier to use, and now common to all editors. You'll see the same layout of tools in the SVP editor. You'll see it in the swath editor. You'll see it in the time series editor as well. So we'll just cover what's in the slice editor. This also came from user feedback. If you're in the slice editor, your job is to look at some points and make some decisions, primarily killing dots for the cases where filters don't catch things. So we made it very, very simple for a user to jump in and figure out that a red polygon makes things go away, and a green polygon makes things come back. If you long press this button over here, you can choose your favorite kind of selection tool. Some people like drawing rectangles. Some people like clicking polygons. That's something that we felt is a less commonly changed thing. So these are all tucked away, but they're handy. This one's my favorite, the kidney bean mode, a little red kidney bean for rejecting the lasso. If we switch to the blue icon, That's the old style of editing where you select soundings and then you right click and decide what to do with them. You can reject, accept, or you can do something like setting the suspect flag. So that's how you do that. That's what the blue polygon means. And then lastly, what we did is we brought the eraser selection tool over from the swath editor as well. So that gives you a circle, and the scroll wheel on your mouse controls the size of it. You left click and hold it down and drag around, and you erase points. So if you can make a tiny little circle if you need to get laser precision into tiny little corners to clean out bad points. So the fourth movie, another little demo, is the vertical exaggeration, and then how the control key helps with that. So the vertical exaggeration, there's a new text box entry in the top right of the slice editor where you can type in a number. So if I want a vertical exaggeration of 2, I can adjust it also with the controls there, the spin box. I can reset the view with the home button, that's always been there. If I scroll wheel with my mouse, I zoom in and out both horizontally and vertically. And what we've added is the control key. If you hit control and scroll wheel on your mouse, you only zoom in vertically. And you'll notice that the exaggeration box, the text is updating in that to capture what the actual achieved exaggeration is. So what if you're a user that wants a fixed exaggeration all the time? You type in a number, and under the context menu, there's an auto zoom button that you disable. And now if you look in the scene, we'll zoom in a little bit so you see the slice that we're pulling out of the area. And as we use the gamer keys to march back and forth, you'll see that the vertical exaggeration stays fixed. And this is really important for some users. They don't want the scale changing because it's tough to tell what's noise and what's an outlier. And your brain has to adapt to that. So some users really want a fixed exaggeration scale. And that's how you do that with that disabling of the auto zoom. So we'll move to the next movie. Visibility of the selected lines is now unselected lines is now controllable. So we've always had for a little while the ability to edit only the selected files. That's in the context menu. In this case, if you look in the raw sonar files list, there's one file that's selected, and that's lit up in coloration. And when you edit it, that is the only file that's edited. The background gray soundings are not edited. And I can choose a different file. You'll see that I hopped a line to the left. And what's new with this last release is you can turn off viewing of the unselected files and make them go away. So sometimes you need them for context, but if you really just want to care about one line and you want to use the slice editor, you can do that. And any edits you do in there will only be with the line that's in the view. Just quickly, here's how you turn it back on. I can get those soundings back, and I can get back out of edit only selected mode. The sixth movie is delayed loading of points. This is for the case where you need to move your slice box around and make some adjustments, resize it, rotate it. That can get a little tedious if you're dealing with large data sets, because previously when you moved it, it would load the points and you'd have that little bit of a lag. And if you want to make a small adjustment like I'm doing now, you let go, it has to load. And I just want to tweak it a bit more to rotate it, I have to load it. And so what our solution was to have an option to turn off auto load of points. When that's disabled from the context menu, now I can adjust it, and it doesn't do anything at all until you hit the enter key or the return key on your keyboard. And so you'll see just an example of me doing that a little bit. I've hit enter and it loads the points. I can reposition the box, I can adjust it and hit enter. And this is a user experience that I think users are used to in other software as well. So here I'm just adjusting it. I have complete freedom to adjust it and resize it. And when I hit enter, the points now load. And then again, that's under the context menu, auto load points. The last little movie in this section now is we're using the escape key now consistently for the edit types for rectangle and lasso and polygon in the slice editor. The movie really shows it. I'm not going to try and explain it. So here, the polygon selection always has worked for quite a while with the escape key. If you accidentally picked a point you didn't want, if you hit escape, you make the last selected point disappear. And if you keep hitting escape, you eventually just jump out of the mode altogether and can start a new polygon. And that worked quite fine for that mode. it didn't do before was the rectangle. So now when I hit the rectangle, if I go too far, if I hit escape, the rectangle disappears. So I drag, I hit escape, I basically abandoned that selection operation. So that works for rectangle and also for free select. So like the lasso mode, if I accidentally went too far, I hit escape. So that works for accepting, rejecting, and selecting, and it works consistently across the three of those now. So that's the summary of all the tiny little improvements we made. The whole sum of them make for a much better user experience. And this was best done. We had Mo, the lead developer, sitting with a key user at a conference, going through, and Mo was watching a user use the slice editor, and it was the best way to get things fixed, because every time that user would sit there and groan or pause or sigh, he would ask, why, what's going on? What can we do? And he got the immediate feedback, and he was able to turn around those fixes. So a lot of these got done in the span of 2 or 3 days at the GeoHab conference, and it was really nice for me to see. I just stood back and got out of the way. It's best to get the users with the developers, and we're trying to do that more and more and more now. So we'll take a pause here for questions. At this point, maybe Matt can grab control of the slideshow for the next series, and I'll answer any questions that have come in through the chat box.
So far, actually, there are no questions yet, JB.
All right, good. So I'll mute now, Matt. It's your show. Just let me drive the mouse for a second to mute myself.
Okay. All right. Thanks, JB, and hello, everybody. There we go. Okay, so we've added the ability to clip surfaces by depth. These are also called depth threshold grids. It's a really nice functionality. It also meets NOAA's requirements for single resolution grid submission. So as you can see there in the very basic user interface there on the right side of the slide, a user just sets a minimum and maximum depth, and the surfaces are clipped accordingly. And what's really nice is that the resulting clipped surfaces of various resolution are they're seamless in their interaction, visualization, and functionality in Qimera. But the real key is that they're also dynamic. You can edit those grids directly. They update rapidly with our same dynamic surface technology. And I mean, again, they're standalone dynamic dynamic products. So if you need to do any editing, there's no accompanying source grid that needs to be updated, and then having to recreate a final grid or anything like that. In this case, you're working with the final grids directly, and they update rapidly. So it means for some nice, some really quick editing down the stretch and product finalization and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at these now. Okay, here we go. So we're looking here at a 1 meter, a 2 meter, and a 4 meter clipped grids, per the NOAA specification. I'm going to switch it over to a wireframe view so you can see it even better, where we have our, there's the intersection between the 2 and 4 meter grids. And now I'm looking here at the intersection between the 1 and 2 meter grids. This is per the NOAA spec. They're required to have that overlap there, which is what you're seeing. We're looking in 3D mode now. And you can see there's some noise there. We're going to clean that up. But you get a nice sense here of what these things look like. You get the finer resolution on the top of these rocks. And so yeah, now the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to look at what is some of the core Fledermaus technology, where we're quickly able to take profiles across these grids. That's what I'm doing right now. And you see the 1 meter grid comes in at a green color, the 2 meter grids at a blue color. I'm going to zoom in here. You can see how they interact differently. That's real nice to compare them in this fashion. When you're involved in these nautical charting workflows, you always want to know, if it's real features or if you suspect something's anomalous. You always want to know, what is the magnitude, specifically the vertical magnitude. And this just lets you find that out really quickly. Now I'm looking at a much longer profile here across the 4 meter and the 2 meter grids here. And eventually I'm going to go look at this noise and get a quick estimation of the magnitude of what I'm dealing with here. And in this case, it's pretty obviously noise, but it may not always be this obvious. And a quick estimate of the vertical magnitude of those. And then so we have decided this is noise, this is something we want to deal with. So that's what I'm going to do now. And so we'll tip this back into the overhead view. I'm going to take a selection window and just place it on top of this noise. And then I'm going to call up our slice editor and have a look at this. Just look a little more closely. And then I'm going to tip it into our 3D view here. This is a view that I like to use a lot when I'm editing. You get the 2D perspective there in the slice editor. You get the 3D context of the soundings and the grid. And it's totally customizable. You can make it, look at any angle you want. It's a really nice way to work with things. In this case, so I just set my spline filter to a strong spline. I'm running it. It takes care of most of that noise. I'll get rid of the rest of it here. And then, so yeah, I've dealt with that noise. And now, so I'm exiting our slice editor. I could have deferred this processing until later. In this case, I'm not pausing the video or anything. I'm just letting this thing go. And we're updating a 1 meter, a 2 meter, and a 4 meter final grid right now. That's what's happening. We're editing those directly. And so getting rid of that noise directly to the final products, and you see it's done. It's pretty fast for those 3 grids, and then I'm going to take a quick look at it here in 3D again, and we can feel pretty happy about that. That looks good, and so yeah, that's just excited about these clipped grids and how in our dynamic surface technology, and how it's a pretty fast workflow for finalizing your products. So. Okay, we're going to shift gears a bit here and talk about the new features added to our ENC Plus functionality. And before I even get started, I just want to say in the next demo, you're going to see data, excuse me, from eTrack. And I just want to say thanks a lot to them for letting us use their data. And not just that, but for helping us to guide our development. It's a model that we like to follow. You just heard what JB said, what Mo is doing. In this case, yeah, we're working directly with clients so we can best understand their requirements, deliver the best solutions, and it's a great partnership with eTrack, and I know they're listening right now, so thanks a lot to them. And really nice data, by the way. You see this rec site. We're going to dive in there in just a moment. So we've already had the ability to create S57 features directly from a least depth sounding if it's dangerous, or straight from a grid node otherwise. And either method will ensure agreement to the bathymetry moving forward in case of further processing. And what we've just recently added is the ability you're just lassoing features right on your grid. And an S57 object is created automatically from the most shoal node within that lasso. So it's fast feature management. To make things even faster, once you have the views set up of your feature and the data, you can click that little camera button you see there that's highlighted in the images attribute. And the screen captures are written automatically to the project folder structure, and they're linked to that images attribute automatically. So this is streamlining what was traditionally a really slow and manual process. So let's go and take a look at these things here. So again, this is eTrack's data, and I'm going to look at this rec site. I'm going to use our slice editor again, using that recommended way of looking at things where you're getting the 3D context from the scene. That's exactly what I'm doing now. I'll start the slice editor here. So there it is. It's a really nice looking valley there, and you can see there's a vessel amongst this wreckage, and so in this case we're saying this is dangerous water. I want to create this feature right from the least depth sounding. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just extending that selection window. Now I'm going to just go ahead and I'm still having a look right now, but now I'm just going to select the points, sort those to get the shoal sounding, and then just make an S57 feature right from that least depth sounding. Which is what I just did now. And you see my attributes are already pre-populated because I made a feature before this. Things like SORDAT and SORDIN stick around. I click that camera button. I'm specifying a name for this rec, and it asks me, would you like to go ahead and capture your scene as well? In this case, I say yes. So there we go. In my images attribute, I have those images that are linked. And so on to the next one. And we're going to look at one more feature here. And so I'm just going to zoom to there. And in this case, I've already set a custom hypothesis, but what I do is I just go into our swath editor anyway and just check to make sure. And I end up, we're going to say this is still in dangerous waters considering the traffic that's going through here. And I'm going to basically replicating the process I just did to create a feature from the least step sounding again. So yeah, you'll see there's some pretty tall triangular rects here. I'm sorry, triangular obstructions here. Someone probably knows what this is, and you can see that my surface there is already honoring the least step sounding because I had already previously set that custom hypothesis. I could have just created the feature right from the grid in this case because I set that custom hypothesis. I could have done it either way. In this case, I'm just going to grab the least step sounding. We're going to create a feature right from it. And I will use my camera button again to take that picture. Or first tag it as an obstruction. And click that camera button. I'm looking at my attributes. There it is. Give it a name. You know, we could automate the naming convention of what these images are called pretty easily. I understand that's a specification now. And so there we go. There's 2 features down. And now, so we're going to just look at 2 more, but in this case, we're going to say that, you know, it's in deep water. These aren't, or we've already set a custom hypothesis. And in any event, we want to just create the feature right from a grid node. So that's what I'm going to do now. I see this obstruction here, and I'm going to go to my ENC editor and select this lasso tool and literally just draw a lasso around it. There you go. That's from the shoal's grid node within. It's still an obstruction. It's linked to my valsow. I click the camera button, give it an image name. There we go. Say OK. That's done. Okay, let's go to the next feature investigation here. It's some kind of wreck, it appears, and I'm going to do the same thing. Use my my lasso tool here, lasso around it. Got a feature from the least depth grid node within, and tag this one as a wreck. Hit the camera button, give it a name, and it's done. It's again, these are all linked to the bathy. The last thing I want to do now is use the hotkey Control F, looking inside my folder structure. Here's all the images I've just taken while doing this feature management. They're already in my project's folder structure. They're linked. They're good to go. Okay, and then the last thing I want to show here, if you need to add more images, you can always do that. If you have other screen captures you've taken, you can just browse and then select them, you know, through this interface here. That's what I just showed there. So there you go. You're done with your feature management. Again, if you do any further processing, those are going to update automatically, so you can you know, feel good about the agreement moving forward. So, okay, so I'll go ahead and pause here for questions. If any came up there while I was talking about the clip surfaces or any of the new S57 functionality.
Still no questions, Matt. So I think we can keep going.
Okay, very good. I'll pass the control over back to JB then.
All right, thanks, Matt. Is my audio coming through good?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, thanks. Okay, so let's get to the next stage here. Sneak peek, Qimera 2.0. Here's a big list. I'll read through a little bit, do some explaining. And we got a couple of pictures to show from the work with the developers that have been working on this already for quite a little bit of time. So obviously we're going to try and freshen the user interface. We've got a lot of user experience feedback, particularly from former cloud users. We're going to really tackle that and collect that in a pile and get one last big push on that. Also for Quincy users, we're going to be looking to button down the capability that's in Qimera so that it's just a standalone patch test tool, such that we could start providing a viable alternative to Validator, which is a little bit long in the tooth now and still shipping with Quincy. So there'll be more details on that coming. If you have any questions on that whatsoever, I would love to hear from you. So drop me a line either in the chat box or just follow up with me afterwards. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. The slice editor, Mo has been working on this in the last couple of weeks, has been augmented for 3D editing, and the screen grab in the top right shows that off. So you see the usual in the scene, the 3D scene, you see the point cloud drawn, and then the usual slice editor view below on the left side. On the lower right side is the integrated 3D view, and these are all now coupled. So as you move around each one of them, the soundings light up in each display, and you can get much better context and make decisions. And that integrated 3D slice editing now uses the exact same toolbar as the slice editor. So we'll still have the standard 3D editor because that's the preferred way to do cube editing at the moment. But if you just want plain old-fashioned 3D point editing, that'll be an in-app experience now. And also part of that work is improving the response times in all the various lassoing and rectangle drawing. When you have a lot of large point clouds loaded up, that can get a little sluggish. And Mo's done a fantastic job of getting that streamlined now, so it's quite zippy. So you'll find a big difference on that. Moving down the list, bathymetric LiDAR. Fledermaus has had a large client base in the LiDAR community with the PFM workflows with DMagic and gridding and editing points, and Qimera has been the next generation version of all that. And with this release, we're just focusing on getting some of the capabilities that they had before, and Fledermaus ported over to Qimera. So for example, being able to view the class and sort by class, reject by class, color by class, and then this top right view is actually an image that is hot off the press. The developer got me this, Weston Renaud, about an hour before this webinar, and this shows LiDAR. Well, it's structured from motion data from an aerial drone, but stored in LAS format where there's RGB coloring. And so we'll have things like RGB coloring of the point clouds, and that's what you see there. You see a little bit of tinges of blue in that those displays. What we'll also have across the product line is a new project experience. So that's been something that's very different if you go from Quincy to Qimera to Fledermaus. And what we're doing is taking what we did with Qimera 1.0, finding the common capabilities in the Quincy new project experience and managing projects, fill in the missing bits, and then come up with a common dialogue across the product line that lets you get up and running in the same way and specifying the same defaults. So that'll be coming. Also with Qimera 2.0, we'll have a new geodetic wizard that you'll be able to have access to the full power of the Quincy geodetic engine. That's always been there for Quincy users if you set it up in Quincy. And where we had room to improve in Qimera is if you didn't come from Quincy. For example, if you had Kongsberg.all files, you couldn't get access to the same power of the geodetic configuration that you could from Quincy. So we're building a new user interface that'll let you have access to that, including using the vertical referencing systems, the separation models. And what we have on the lower right is just a quick prototype. This was Mo building this quickly to showing off how to set the different input and output coordinate frames, and also being able to do something like specify the exact transformation in between with EPSG codes and things like that. So this is just a prototype. It's not going to look like this when we ship it, but this was just allow us to get it all hooked up to the various routines that we have in the library. A big improvement will come with a movement to the grid 5 data format. That's the next generation grid structure. Right now, the dynamic surface is built on grid 3 for just standard gridding and point editing, and if you use Cube, there's touches of grid 4 in there. Grid 5 is going to unify all of that into a single file as much as possible. There'll be faster updates for visualization and streaming from disk. This tech is already largely completed and done and ready for Fledermaus 8, which is coming out later this year. With the 2.0 release, we'll be integrating the use of that grid structure in Qimera. And the nice thing is that new grid structure is basically backscatter ready in a way that the older structure just really was only meant for bathymetry. This is a new future-proof container that really lets us put anything we like in it. And this is one of the precursor stages we need to get through before we do the FMGT integration. So that's backscatter processing. That won't be coming in 2.0. That'll be coming in a later on release. And then finally, what's coming in 2.0 is the feedback project, and that's the last topic of this this webinar, is how we're attempting to build what users want, not what we think what users want. We're letting users tell us that. So before I move on to that, of course, someone's going to ask, when are we releasing 2.0? We're currently planning to have that out in Q1 of next year. So the feedback project, I'll just take a little, before I list off the items from the feedback project that are coming in 2.0, I'll take a minute to explain what that is. So we get suggestions from users. So we get them in person, we get them in conferences, phone calls, emails. Sometimes they're logged in our support system. When we get that, that's visible to the person that reports it only, and we get a lot of them. What we do is we convert them into feedback cases. We create another case, and it's anonymized, and then it's an entirely new system, and that's completely open to all users that can log into our support system in Jira. People can see all the cases. We've removed all the personal identity of who reported it in the first place. And then users can vote and they can comment and engage with each other in that system. And then from the feedback cases, we see what trickles to the top in terms of the top votes. And then we turn them into development cases. And really, we strive to just focus on the top voted items. And just to give you a sense of what it's like to be a product manager, for Qimera, since we released it in 2016, we've had roughly 850 feature requests or suggestions from users. We've got about 60 left to review. Of those, we've either implemented some of them or we've realized that many are duplicates. We've made 234 feedback cases. And then since we've started using the feedback project to drive development in February of this year, we've delivered 19 of them, which doesn't sound like a big number, but that's roughly 10% of the 234 feedback cases, which is not bad in 6 or 7 months of having deployed that system. So what's our track record? Well, first, before I move into that, why are we doing this? I don't know if you guys can see my mouse moving around. This pile here is where it's a pile of user suggestions, and the user asks that. And before we had this, they would only see the releases. They see what gets built. And then there's a big disconnect about the things that are asked for and then the things that get built. And what we wanted to have was some transparency into the process. People should see how we go through the tough job of deciding of 850 suggestions, how do we focus on which ones we should build? So we want transparency. We want the users to have some input, and we want them to be able to work together to help us decide that. And also it gives us some accountability. If we're building things that aren't in that feedback case, then we're basically lying to ourselves and to our users. We need to be able to deliver on this, and that's what we aim to do. So what's the track record on this for Qimera? Since we released Qimera 1.6 in February this year, there were 234 feedback cases available for voting. We resolved 19 of them, satisfying a total of 75 votes. On the right-hand side, you see what this looks like in the filters when you go to the voting system online. For context, Quincy's been doing this for quite a little bit of time, and this is where we started the feedback project as a pilot project in April of 2016. To date, there's 465 user suggestions that have been migrated to the visible and votable feedback system. We've resolved 54 of those items and satisfied 322 votes. And then what about Fledermaus? Well, we've been busy building Qimera and getting that up and running. Meanwhile, in the background, we've been building Fledermaus 8. So when we release Fledermaus 8 in Q4 of this year, we'll start populating the Fledermaus feedback project. And an awful lot of the outstanding suggestions in the Fledermaus feedbacks, the pile of suggestion cases are going to be addressed by Fledermaus 8. And we'll start actively using that there. Speaking of Fledermaus, here's a nice image that you'll see, I think, coming out on social media later today or tomorrow, just a sneak peek. We'll be doing a workshop on Fledermaus 8 next Thursday morning at Shallow Survey. That's October 4th. And you'll see from this screen here that you're going to recognize, if you used Qimera, that this kind of looks and feels like Qimera a little bit. Qimera, and that's the reason is that Qimera took what Fledermaus did great, and then it gave it a new look and feel for point editing. So all the things that we thought were good ideas, and we got feedback that were good ideas, have now propagated into Fledermaus 8. So it has a similar look and feel. You'll find a lot of familiar things. What's interesting and new is that there's a brand new visualization engine that's scalable and future-proof using modern OpenGL as opposed to the older tech that we've had in there for quite a while. You'll be able to load bigger grids with Grid 5, and you'll be able to load bigger point clouds, and it'll be more responsive. And then the engine itself is amenable to being improved and streamlined further. And then the really cool thing that I'm really excited about, because I spent a lot of time talking about our software to people, is the ability to do very easy, deadly easy fly-throughs. You set up your view in the scene, you put some anchor points, and you basically put it into a presentation mode where you can walk through the slides and add context and text and imagery, and then you can render that into a movie. So before it was a little bit difficult to do fly-throughs and to get it exactly right. Now it's going to be deadly easy. It takes a matter of minutes. And then the other thing that's coming is that you'll be able to open QPS projects from Quincy and Qimera natively directly. So Fledermaus, you just point it at a QPS project, you open it up, so it can be fresh off the survey boat, fresh out of the hands of the data reviewers, and you can pass that off to the survey manager or to the person who has to give an update to the client, and then put a few pinpricks in the map, and then go into the presentation mode and give an update to your clients, and it just works really, really seamlessly. So this is something that we're very excited to be able to show off next Thursday. So that was a tangent off of a tangent. So we're coming back to the feedback project. I just want to remind people, how can you participate in the feedback project? Here's a screenshot of Jira, our help desk system. You'll notice up here there's a link. We want to build the software that you need. Please vote on the issues. You click on please vote on the issues. That brings you to the dashboard where you can review all the feedback cases for each product. And then also, if you want to read a little bit more about how we decide what cases to focus on, there's a couple of nice links there that really capture some of that. What's basically our public and public feedback policy. Here's how we're deciding to work on this. We want that to be visible and accountable. And then also there's a second link using the feedback project page that gives you some guidance on how to navigate it and find things that you're looking for. So that, coming back, what's coming in 2.0. So I took a little tangent to talk about the feedback project. Here is what the feedback project has done for us since February. We've populated with over 200 cases. The votes are in. If you're in New Brunswick today, we just had an election, so everyone's talking about votes, so it's pretty timely. All the votes are in, and you can see that they're changing dynamically. On the right, you see a list of cases sorted by votes. When we planned the 2.0 release, we literally just went to this stack of cases that are vote sorted, and we grabbed the top 15, 20, 25, and we grabbed ones that are thematically aligned with the release and stopped there. Really, it was a 10-minute job. And I love it as a product manager. I'm pretty busy. The voting did the work. I didn't have to think about it a whole lot. And then the users really helped the issues that they want solved bubble to the top. And I go to that and I say, thank you very much. And we give it to the development team. And then we see, okay, what do we got to do to get these done? So what's in the coming in 2.0? This entire list on the left is what's coming. I'm not going to read through it. That's a lot of reading. The ones in green are highlighted because those are the ones that are done already. If we were to ship tomorrow, well, we need to test them and document them, obviously. These are ready to go. So we've already made some good headway. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the laser scanner calibration in the patch test tool is something that a lot of Quincy users want. So that will be available. And general patch test improvements. There's a lot of little ideas, and if you take them all and put them together, it makes for a much better user experience. I'm not going to read through this. We can maybe just answer some questions about them if anybody has any in the chat box, or following up afterward. So that's it for today. We'll pause and take some questions and see what's what.
Let's see. We did have one question, JB, and that was about how to make the seafloor have the sandy color. So I think it was possibly a change of the color map. But
yeah. I think we've used that in a few screen grabs. I know the ones that I did. I choose the copper color map, and that's something you typically see with side scan data. It works really nice in bathymetry too. It's just a nice way to give a quick different view.
Great. Well, that was actually the only question, and then followed by a comment that they really enjoyed the contrast between the seafloor and the features over it. So it was a nice display.
Oh, I think maybe in the Fledermaus, I'll jump back a couple slides. This one here, is that what the person's talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
And Danny will explain, Danny Neville, the product manager for Fledermaus 8, I'm sure will explain how to do that in the workshop on Thursday. I'm looking at this, and I've not actually used Fledermaus 8 yet a whole lot, so I don't know how he got around to doing this. I do this in Qimera where everything changes, but he's got a trick up his sleeve, so he'll show that there.
Great. Well, and we can follow up. Let's see. Oh, one more question here. It says, will version 2, so when Qimera 2.0 comes out, will it be fully compatible with version 1 or require any migration of projects?
We're going to be making what's called a breaking change to the grid formats, and then also some, well, careful changes to the QPD format, which is where we store our point data. We do have migration tech. This is something that we need to sit down and figure out just how easy it is to have that kind of compatibility. But we're still well away from that point in time. So this is work that's ongoing now.
All right, great. Well, I believe that is all of our questions. So we've answered them all.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Sam, you want to wrap it up, and then I'll mute myself.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll follow up with each of you through email, and anybody who has typed in evaluate, if you'd like the Qimera evaluation, we'll be sure to follow up with you with an evaluation license. If you haven't typed in evaluate yet, but that's something you're interested in, please feel free to do so before you leave the webinar. And otherwise, yeah, you'll get an email from us that will include a link to the YouTube channel so that you can listen to this and view it again. All right, thanks so much. Bye.